Humans traditionally treat morality as a divine decree, a universal law written into the firmware of the cosmos. It's a top-down model that assumes our rules for behavior were handed down in finished form. From a systems lens, these stories look different. Every culture relies on a boring faction, the people who build archives, maintain calendars, and copy scrolls to keep information from scattering. Morality is the conscious experience of this effort. It is a biological survival algorithm designed to prevent primate networks from losing their internal structure. In this framework, good and evil function as diagnostic labels. Good represents behavioral patterns that stabilize the network and reduce variance. Evil represents patterns that inject noise, unpredictability, or defection into the system. This system operates as a wireless signal. It lacks physical mass and relies entirely on invisible social pressure and voluntary compliance to coordinate the nodes in the network. The signal is energy dependent. When individual biological nodes face exhaustion, starvation, or extreme environmental stress, the energy required to maintain the moral protocol drops. The hardware prioritizes its own immediate survival over the voluntary social contract. This reliance on voluntary energy makes the network fragile. Under a high load crisis, the wireless signal degrades, risking a network crash as nodes begin to prioritize local output over global stability. This mechanical route explains why moral disagreements escalate so quickly. We don't experience them as philosophical debates. We experience them as visceral, high-heat conflicts. Morality follows the logic of flavor. It is a real, emotionally charged experience, but architecturally dependent. Just as a tongue detects chemical composition, a nervous system evolved a pattern stability detector. It is an intense experience, but one that is local rather than universal. When a moral framework is violated, the brain registers an unmanaged data error. It fires the same survival circuits used to detect spoiled food. The body detects a threat to its internal architecture and triggers an immediate immune response. This illustrates the persistence razor. A system applies the moral label to a behavior only if that pattern increases net stability across timescales that matter for survival. If a behavior injects noise or fragility, the system labels it immoral and attempts to purge it. Moral outrage is simply a biological reflex. The nervous system protects its own stability by rejecting a pattern it perceives as a threat to its existence. Moral rules fossilize based on specific environmental failure modes. In the ancient world, tight resource ceilings and limited medical knowledge created specific survival requirements. Ancient dietary restrictions functioned as survival heuristics. Before refrigeration and germ theory, avoiding high-risk foods was a calculated move to prevent disease from collapsing a small, isolated community. Over centuries, these heuristics were coded as sacred laws. As the environment changes, the payoff matrix for different behaviors shifts. Technological and institutional advancements allow a society to survive failure modes that would have previously been lethal. History shows this shift in the transition from coercion to cooperation. Systemic coercion spikes immediate output, but stifles the long-term innovation needed for scaling. Voluntary cooperation compounds trust and adaptability, providing a more stable foundation for a complex economy. The moral label followed the change in survival efficiency. A society updates its moral code when the environment's failure modes dictate a new strategy. Rules are rewritten to match the current requirements for persistence. The failure of the voluntary wireless signal is visible at any busy intersection. Two drivers in 2-ton steel boxes arrive at a 4-way stop at the same time. The social heuristic says they should coordinate. If one driver is exhausted and their biological battery is drained, their predictive brain stops calculating the social contract. It prioritizes its own momentum. When the voluntary signal fails, the conflict is resolved by raw physics. Steel folds, glass bursts. The network absorbs a physical perturbation because the moral heuristic lacked the force to prevent the collision. A planetary civilization cannot scale if it relies on an honor system. Under pressure, individual nodes defect, and unconstrained defection causes the entire grid to catch fire. To prevent this, the network centralizes the right to apply friction. It strips individual nodes of the power to resolve conflicts and assigns it to a designated class of enforcers. The law is not a philosophy. It is an externalized reservoir of physical force. It is the hardware layer of the stack, designed to leash the variance of biological actors. The legal system replaces the uncertainty of a voluntary signal with a guaranteed physical or economic cost. It moves the consequence of defection from a social taboo to a mechanical response. This is a systemic trade-off. The network limits local, individual freedom to secure global stability. We accept the constraint to keep the entire stack from collapsing. Morality is the luxury software that runs when our needs are met, but the law is the hardware constraint that holds the grid together when cooperation stops.